right, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Field Performance Metrics webinar. We're so excited to have Taylor joining us today from Southeast Restoration. I'll quickly introduce myself and go over a couple of housekeeping items. My name's Leah Vucic. I'm the Director of Product and Content Marketing here at Encircle. And we love bringing really great people in the restoration industry, great thought leaders, bringing them to restorers to learn and educate and train our customers and people who aren't customers. So really excited for this one today. So like I said, we're excited to welcome Taylor Carmichael. She's the Director of Systems at Southeast Restoration. So what we're going to do today, Taylor's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to jump into the details. We're going to talk about KPIs and metrics, all the good business stuff, to like what you should measure to get the best performance from your field. So we'll talk about that. Then we're going to get into the really good stuff, how to make it actionable. That's one thing that we really want to do at all of our Encircle webinars, is not just talk high level theoretical things, but we want to put things into practice. We want to give you actionable takeaways that you can go and implement in your business today, tomorrow, or next week. So Taylor will go through making it actionable, and then we'll tie those metrics to profitability and how can improving some of your field performance metrics improve the profitability of your business. And like I said, we'll wrap up with Q&A and a few housekeeping items at the end. Okay, I just did a lot of talking really quickly. So Taylor, for those joining who don't already know you, can you please share your role at Southeast Restoration and what your focus is day to day?
Absolutely. Thank you, Leah. So when I first started at Southeast Restoration now almost 11 years ago, early on, I remember sitting in on a project manager meeting where both sides were frustrated. The office was asking, well, why don't we have all of this documentation that we need to build for this job? And the field was saying, why are we always getting asked for the same information over and over? And at the time, that was my wake-up call as a systems-minded person. I realized the problem wasn't our field team's effort, because our people care deeply. The problem that we had at the time was we were not measuring the right things in the right way, because without clear field metrics, the office kept chasing paperwork, the field crews kept feeling hounded, both sides were busy, but neither side ever felt like they were winning. And that's why I'm super excited to be a part of today's conversation, because it matters. It matters to restorers, because when you identify and track the right performance metrics in the field, you eliminate that frustration on both ends. Your techs feel supported instead of second guessed. The office can get the information they need without chasing. And we want our customers to see a smoother and a faster process. So anyhow, for those of you that have not met me before, my name is Taylor Carmichael, and I serve as the Director of Systems here at Southeast Restoration. And my role lives in the middle of both of those two worlds, the office and the field. I spend my days making sure that the tools, the processes, and the technology that we put into place are accelerators for our field crews and not anchors weighing them down. And that's exactly what today is all about. Field metrics that matter, because we're all about reducing friction here at Southeast Restoration. And the right measurements don't just reduce friction, they create momentum for your entire business.
That's awesome. Thank you, Taylor. So why do you think that field metrics have become such an important conversation in restoration?
I think that field metrics are becoming an important conversation. It's because the industry is shifting. It used to be enough to just get the job done and send a bill. But now carriers and adjusters, they are running their own analytics, even AI tools, of course, to evaluate us, the contractor. If we don't have our own data, we lose leverage when there is a dispute. And on top of that, Every contractor knows the pain of chasing down paperwork weeks after the fact. Without those clear metrics, you're constantly just reacting. Did that moisture map get uploaded? Or why has this estimate not been submitted yet? And these metrics give you a proactive lever as opposed to a reactive mindset. For example, if you know that your documentation is lagging behind in work, you can coach in real time instead of waiting until that job is already delayed and your customer's frustrated. And also, it's about predictability. With no metrics, every job feels like a new fire drill. And with metrics, you can anticipate the problems before they burn you. And a couple of key metrics, they only matter if you measure them consistently and they're connected to outcomes that your team actually cares about. So that means, one, you need to define how that metric is going to be tracked. One of my favorite authors, his name is Peter Drucker, and he said, "What gets measured gets managed. What gets measured gets managed." Small, simple quote, but certainly relatable. So don't leave it to your gut feel. You need to make your metrics objective and also consistent. And secondly, they need to be visible. Maybe you can create customized dashboards or scorecards or maybe even whiteboards that you set up in your shop, because when the team can see where they stand, the conversation can shift from leadership just checking in to everyone owning their numbers. And then lastly, I would suggest to tie your metrics to your impact, because if you're telling a technician to just improve documentation speed, you need to show them how is that going to reduce callbacks? How is that going to help close jobs faster and protect those gross margins? The why of that metric, it has to connect to their world too, not just the offices. And that is where your buy-in can happen, because if your field teams see metrics as a tool to make their jobs easier and not just a report card, they will lean in. They're going to stop feeling chased down for paperwork and start feeling supported with clear targets that are designed to help them win.
Great. Thanks so much, Taylor. One of the things that I wanted to mention in my last, getting to know Taylor over the last month and a bit, Southeast Restoration is your job is not it's not a small job. Southeast Restoration is quite a large operation. I think you said that you have 300 employees.
Close to 300, yes.
Across several locations, is that right?
That is right. We currently have 8 offices, including our support center, that span across Georgia and Tennessee.
That's amazing. So I think Taylor is an excellent person to talk to about systems and operations and sort of running a tight ship. Because if you can, run things smoothly with 300 operations, certainly if there's people joining today who have smaller businesses, she is also going to talk about how we can sort of scale that back to suit those smaller businesses. Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about from the ground up, field operations, what KPIs we should measure and how to narrow down to the right ones. So Taylor, there are probably hundreds of metrics that somebody could track, but where should somebody actually start? What would you say are the 3 to 5 most valuable field metrics that somebody should start tracking?
So the biggest mistake that I have seen is trying to track all the things, 20 metrics all at one time. Because when you do that, you just create noise. And the real work that you need to do before you define what your metrics are is define where your friction actually is. What is slowing down your jobs? What's causing rework with warranties? What's holding up your cash flow? Once you can define that friction, you can focus on a handful of metrics that matter to your business the most. and the ones that directly impact your customer experience and your cash flow. For us, the 5 biggest KPIs and metrics that make a difference are, the first one is cycle time from start to finish. A 3-day water job dragging into 7 days, it is going to cost you in equipment, overhead, customer frustration, and of course, delayed repairs. So how can you measure that? You can pull, start and completion dates directly from whatever job management system that you're using to keep those KPIs objective and not subjective. And as it relates to buy-in, you could frame this metric as urgency for the customers. For example, the faster we move, the sooner that customer gets their life back. The second metric that I would suggest is documentation, speed, and accuracy. If 60% of your estimates are coming back with corrections, you are bleeding time. It's important for clean documentation on the first try because that just accelerates the full process. For thinking about how to measure that, you can track time from inspection or completion to the estimate submission date, and also perhaps monitor the percent of first pass estimate approvals. And for your team's buy-in, you can show your technicians, your field crew, how those real-time uploads, it's going to mean fewer late night callbacks for them, less paperwork piling up at the end of the week. And the third metric that I would also like to talk about today, which is a big one for us, is equipment validation. It's important to track what should have been placed versus the equipment that was actually placed on the job. If you set 20 DQs and only 12 show up validated in the software, you know right then and there, your plan isn't being executed and dollars are getting left on the table. So how can you measure that? You can compare your placement logs against job requirements and Encircle, of course. And for your team's buy-in, tie it to accountability for them and safety. You can say, the right equipment, it protects both the property and also your organization's reputation. And the fourth metric that we also track here at Southeast Restoration is estimated versus actual demo completion dates. We know if a demo runs late, so does everything else. Drying, repairs, approvals, and hitting your demo dates, it is going to unlock the rest of the claim. So how can you measure that? You can monitor the scheduled demo completion date in whatever job management system that you're using, and then look at the actual date that demolition was completed. And for your team's buy-in, show your crews how hitting those demo dates, it's going to keep the jobs flowing. There's going to be less sitting around waiting and better scheduling for your repair estimators, which means more jobs completed on time. And lastly, the fifth and final metric, even though, yes, there are certainly hundreds that I would love the opportunity to talk about, is opportunity to submission speed. Because the clock starts when that call comes in. The faster an estimate is in a carrier's inbox, that means faster approvals, repairs, and also AR. So how can you measure that? You can track the time from the job received to the estimate submission date. And for buy-in for your team, you can position that as a sales advantage. The fastest clean estimate often wins that adjuster's confidence and gets that claim approved faster. So the bottom line here is these are practical field-driven metrics, but it does tie back to real dollars. And when measured consistently and again connected to what matters for both the customer and your crew, these metrics are going to stop feeling like just corporate numbers, and it's going to start becoming tools that the whole entire team wants to improve on.
That's great. Excuse me. So you talked about tying those numbers to business priorities. How do you make sure that those metrics do connect back to those bigger business priorities like customer experience, job speed, cash flow, things like that?
Sure. With that, I think there's just a simple test that we all need to ask ourselves. Does the metric move the needle for the customer, for the job, or the money? And if your answer is no, it's probably just a vanity metric that you likely don't even need to be tracking to begin with. And at Southeast, we've always learned to connect the dots. For example, if a metric improves customer communication, you're going to see fewer phone calls asking, what's going on with my property? And that directly improves your customer's experience. If a metric shortens cycle times, the adjuster isn't waiting weeks to see an estimate submitted. And faster submission means faster approvals, faster repairs, and customers who feel like their life is ultimately moving forward again. And a metric can also accelerate your documentation accuracy, reduce rework as it relates to warranties. And that means cash flow improves because the money isn't tied up in unnecessary disputes or perhaps in delays. So for how to measure that, it's just so incredibly important to make sure that your metrics that you define, again, where are those friction points? But you need to make those metrics visible with customized dashboards, scorecards, bring it to your weekly huddles so everyone can see the impact. And a couple of points on how we build buy-in and what we're talking about is it's so important to make sure that your metrics are engaging. One example that we are currently implementing right now is our Tournament of Champions annual initiatives. And we have our departments that are competing on KPIs with cash incentives and fun recognition for them. And that transforms your metrics from corporate reporting into something that your team, they actually want to win at. And it's so important to reinforce that why as a technician should this be important to me? You have to reinforce that why every time. Because when the team understands how hitting a number improves the customer experience or the organization's profitability, they're going to take pride in that instead of just seeing this metric as busy work. And just key takeaway here is that metrics, they matter when they're tied to real outcomes. When people can see how their work is moving the needle for a customer, the job, or collections, that accountability, it's ultimately going to turn into ownership.
You talked about vanity metrics and maybe tracking things that don't matter, but have you ever seen the wrong metric drive the wrong behavior? Do you have an example of that?
We most certainly have. I would say a classic trap in our industry is only focusing on speed, how fast jobs can be closed. And I mean, on paper, sure, that looks great. But what often happens is callbacks or warranty work that starts piling up, and your customers are going to lose confidence. Adjusters are going to question your quality. Profits could shrink because that extra labor is coming straight out of your margin. And with this question, it's a good reminder that your metrics, they need balance. Speed without quality, it's certainly not a win. You have to measure both the pace and the accuracy of the work, or else the metric that you're tracking is it's ultimately just going to end up working against you. So thinking of ways of how you could prevent that is you can pair every output metric with, say, a quality check metric. For example, track cycle time, and the percent of jobs with 0 rework or callbacks. And then I've said it before, but just make sure that your teams understand that why behind their numbers, because if they see speed celebrated without quality, they're going to cut corners. But if they're both celebrated, they'll balance that urgency with also true craftsmanship. And it's so important to review your metrics regularly, because if you see a KPI pushing behavior in the wrong direction, just adjust it, because your metrics should serve the business and certainly not the other way around. You need those metrics to ultimately create that alignment. The wrong one is going to create tension, and balance is what keeps metrics from becoming just another pressure point and turns them into a lever for better performance for your field team.
Sonny Taylor, I saw a quote today, and I'll probably get the quote wrong, but it said something to the effect of speed without quality or just faster mistakes. So I thought that that ties really well with what you were just covering. All right, Taylor, are you ready? You're the systems director. So this is your bread and butter now, which is like putting these things into practice, and how do you actually do it?
This is what I live for.
So now that you've identified the right KPIs for your business, how does someone go about rolling them out so that techs understand? You've already talked a little bit about buy-in, but we want to make sure that people understand that why and buy in. So how do we do it?
Yes, change management is not easy, especially when you have a big ship to turn. But I just encourage you to, once you have defined what your friction points are, what problem are we trying to solve here, and then you define those metrics, don't just dump them all on your team at one time. Trust me, I've learned from my mistakes. So at Southeast, we roll out metrics as annual initiatives. I mentioned one earlier. That's one of our annual initiatives currently, is called Tournament of Champions, where we're competing with our KPIs in our departments. And we roll out new metrics as annual initiatives, and then we break them down into quarterly priorities. And that rhythm, it gives our team enough time to focus, learn, and adjust before the next quarter when the next set of numbers is going to be introduced. And each one of these quarterly priority launches, it comes with training, some in person, some virtual. So every team member knows both what we're tracking and, again, why does it matter. For smaller shops, I would say to start with maybe just 1 or 2 KPIs. Build that consistency and then layer on more, because if you roll out too many metrics at one time, they're unfortunately likely going to get ignored. And again, for buy-in, those scorecards and dashboards, one page alone should tell a team member exactly what's expected and where they stand. And that visibility is going to reduce the need for constant explanation over and over again. And reinforcement, again, is so important. And we bake our metrics into daily and weekly huddles and coaching conversations. So that reinforcement, it becomes a part of our rhythm. And it's not just something that leadership is checking in on quarterly. It's got to be reinforced. And recognition, we are big on celebrating wins here at Southeast Restoration. Sometimes that's with incentives, sometimes it's just with public recognition and a huddle. But when people see their numbers tied to real appreciation, they will lean in. And that buy-in, it comes from you slowing down long enough to provide that team member with clarity and consistency. So if your metrics are simple, visible, and they're connected to outcomes that your team actually cares about, they're going to become a shared scorecard for success for the whole team.
This is great. This is something that in my 4 years of Encircle, I consistently hear people asking about, well, how do I get my team to my field team to just do the thing I need to do? And pounding your fist is not pounding
Work.
it's not going to work. So what simple habits or tools have helped your field teams to hit their numbers consistently?
Well, part of why we're here today, Encircle has been a game changer for us because it makes real-time documentation possible. But you also have to consider that tools alone, and while Encircle is a wonderful tool, that tool alone is not going to solve your problem because habits are what make the real difference. And one of the best practices for us have been daily and weekly huddles with your specific department. And that gives us a chance to recognize wins amongst the team, highlight clean Encircle documentation, and it helps just keep our standards and our metrics visible and clear. And recognition, it doesn't always have to be some big grandiose thing. Sometimes it's really just as simple as a handwritten thank you note to a technician who provided second mile service on a job, or even a shout out when a customer shares positive feedback on one of our social media websites. And those small touches, it goes a long way towards buy-in when people feel truly appreciated. And another key is you have to have consistent rhythms. You cannot bring up KPIs just once a quarter and expect change. They have to be a part of weekly conversations and coaching moments. It cannot just come from the top down. And when department managers are the ones talking about KPIs in the team's meeting, it shifts ownership. You don't want your metrics to be just the leadership team's numbers. It needs to be our numbers, their numbers, something that the team is going to take ownership in improving. And like I mentioned earlier about tools, the tools give you the capability, sure, but your habits and your rhythms, that is what is going to create consistency. And that combination, it's what is going to turn your KPIs from just a report card into a culture of accountability.
That's exactly what you were talking about in that CNR article that I referenced at the beginning. It was talking about tools, but it has to be combined.
It's more than that. Yeah.
It's more than that. It has to be combined with habits and consistency. So the next question I have for you, Taylor, is how do you keep accountability high in your field teams? I know for myself as a people leader and a people manager, you always you want to avoid slipping into that micromanagement. So how do you keep accountability without becoming a micromanager?
That is a tough line, a fine line to find the balance. And for us at Southeast, our customized scoreboards and our BI analytics, it really does most of the work for us because we are firm believers that when our metrics are public for the team, again, via a dashboard or some sort of simple tracker, people are naturally going to step it up because nobody wants to be at the bottom of the stack rank. I certainly don't. And that visibility, it creates that accountability without constant oversight for management. And you have to reinforce that it's not just about numbers, it's about your company's culture. The behaviors that you recognize and praise, they are going to be the behaviors that get repeated. Public recognition in meetings, small competitions, like I mentioned in our Tournament of Champions, or a quick shout out, it can build a culture where accountability, it should feel encouraging and not heavy handed, or like you said, pounding the fist, because that's just, it's not going to work. And the truth is, obviously, coming from a systems-minded individual, micromanagement is going to creep in when you don't have systems in place. If expectations are not clear, your managers are going to end up hovering. But when you've got a clear playbook or regular rhythms in place, visible metrics, the accountability, it's going to end up taking care of itself. And that allows leaders to coach and support instead of chasing and correcting. And when systems can provide clarity and recognition builds your culture, accountability is going to end up feeling like empowerment and not micromanagement.
Great lessons, I'm sure, for myself, and I'm in the corporate world and I'm not in restoration. So really great lessons for myself as a manager, but I'm sure for the people listening as well. That was really great. What's been the biggest lesson that you've learned about getting field teams genuinely engaged with company goals?
That has been something over the years that we have struggled with, but we have learned really the lesson's simple. If the metric doesn't matter to them, it's just ultimately not going to stick. So if the field teams can see, if they see a KPI as busy work or just another step already in their process, their jobs are already tough. So if you're just adding in another step without explaining that why is this going to be a benefit of them to their role, they're just going to roll their eyes. But if you can show how that KPI, how that metric, how you are eliminating that friction point, how it's going to make their job easier with fewer callbacks, less paperwork after hours, maybe more automated paperwork, and then recognition for them, they will buy in because it stops feeling like a chore and the metrics start feeling more like a tool that's designed to help them win. And one moment that really proved this for us was when field team members started walking into their weekly huddles ready with their own numbers to report on. And that shift from leadership chasing down that data to the field crews owning that metric themselves, it only happened because they saw relevance for that KPI. And ultimately, the truth is engagement will fade if leadership does not keep reinforcing it. Your culture is built by repetition. Think of it like water on the rock. And that steady drip of talking about the right metrics, recognizing that progress, and tying it back to your numbers and tying it to real wins, that is what shapes your habits, and ultimately it shapes your culture, which is the most important thing. So it's just important to define metrics that are meaningful, relevant, and consistently reinforced, consistently talked about, so that ownership can shift from leadership to the field crew actually buying in, because that's ultimately when the engagement becomes real.
Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is profitability. A lot of folks joining us today are business owners, and so these things are important for your company culture and retaining good employees and morale and all of those great things. But we want to tie that into the profitability of a business and where you're going to see impact and tying it to the financial results. So can you tell us from your perspective, how do better field metrics translate into faster, more complete documentation?
Yes, I would say that whatever metrics you define, they need to create urgency in the right places. When you measure documentation speed, it signals to the field that uploading in real time, it matters. Instead of waiting until the end of the week, technicians can capture and submit that documentation as they go. And that one habit alone of real-time documentation upload, it can eliminate just half the back and forth corrections that we have seen before. And the tools that we provide, it should certainly make that even easier. Things like guided documentation, like a standard moisture log with an Encircle, or perhaps a photo checklist. That ensures that the right information gets captured the first time. Nothing's missed, and it certainly should not have to be redone again later because you missed something on the front end. And the result is less chasing and more progress. Instead of, say, project managers spending hours hunting down missed photos or missing dry logs, they can focus on actually moving the job forward. And again, when those metrics, they have to set clear expectations, and the tools, such as Encircle, it should make that compliance simple. That documentation then becomes complete, consistent, and ultimately it just means smoother claims and quicker cash flow for your business.
That's great. So now let's make the connection between that documentation and profitability. So once documentation improves, what's the ripple effect? Where do the dominoes go on approvals, collections, and gross margin?
If you think about it, the concept, it's really just a straight line. Clean files mean quick approvals. Quick approvals mean quick cash. And quick cash is ultimately going to protect your margins. When projects are documented well and run consistently, you don't bleed profit through rework and warranties, disputes, or delays. And approvals move faster in the process because the carrier has everything they need up front. And then collections follow because the invoices, they don't get stuck between the back and forth. And the end result is stronger gross margin and a healthier operating profit. Because at the end of the day, good data is going to equip both you and the carrier to make quick, confident decisions, and that the speed and consistency are what's going to keep cash flowing and your margins protected at the end of the day.
Okay, we're coming up with about less than 20 minutes left, and I know we're going to have, I'm sure we'll have some good questions coming in, and lots of questions were submitted in advance actually for Taylor, so we'll have lots of time to get Taylor to answer some of those questions. But Taylor, can you share an example where improving just one single metric made a big impact on profitability?
Yes, that's a really good question. And one of the metrics that we started tracking, gosh, I don't know, maybe even last year, was our estimated demo completion date. When we started hitting that date consistently, we noticed that everything else, it kind of fell into place. Repair estimators could get on site at the right time, not too early, not too late. And that meant that repair estimates were submitted faster. Customers got that clarity sooner, and then carriers could approve without unnecessary delays. And that one metric, again, the estimated demo completion date, that metric, it unlocked cash flow. It kept our customers more satisfied with a seamless transition from water mitigation to the repair side. And as mentioned previously, really the lesson here in this webinar is it's not about tracking everything. Don't be guilty of getting that shiny object syndrome, but it's about finding that one friction point, or a few friction points, sure, that's going to unlock speed in your business, cash flow, and then that gross margin for the entire job.
Amazing. Okay, we're going to move on to a couple of questions. I've answered some already in the Q&A box. So if you do have some questions, please add them to the Q&A or into the chat. One question I'm going to ask you, Taylor, is if you had just one metric, and I know you talked about the demo completion date as being one that you guys find really important. But if you could add just one metric tomorrow to a restoration business, what would it be and why?
That's a tough one. Out of the metrics, I would say one that I would certainly add tomorrow is tracking opportunity to estimate submission time. And the reason why, in restoration, speed to the carrier isn't about just mitigation. It's about how quickly you move the whole sales pipeline forward. And the longer it takes from the moment you receive a new opportunity to when an estimate is submitted to the carrier, the more likely that your customer is going to get frustrated. The adjuster might lose confidence, or even worse, another contractor might slip in. And we've seen that when our teams shrink that turnaround window from opportunity to estimate submission, even just by a couple of days, it directly has an impact on our close rates and our cash flows, because those faster submissions to the carrier, faster approvals, it means that your jobs can get started even quicker, and the customer has confidence that things are actually moving along. And that opportunity to estimate submission, it truly is a real sales lever. The companies that win in restoration, they might not always be the cheapest, but they're the ones who are first in the adjuster's inbox with a clean and, most importantly, a defensible estimate.
Great. A couple of questions that have just come through. One of them is around software and tools. So can you make a suggestion for what are some job management software or tools that can help track the speed of estimates sent out?
Yes, I can. So the job management system that Southeast has been using since 2011 now is PSA by Can-Am Systems. And within that job management software, we were able to define customized dates, such as some of these metrics and KPIs that we've been talking about today. And then my team is able to take that data, and we have a team here that creates our own analytics using Power BI, business intelligence. So we are taking that information from our job management system and then creating customized scoreboards and dashboards so our teams can ultimately see those scores of their metrics. But PSA is a excellent job management software. That's the one I can speak to because that's the one we use here at Southeast. And Power BI. If you don't have a development team like I am so unbelievably blessed to have, JOC Analytics is a very strong contender in helping you with any BI needs that you might have.
Right, that's super helpful. Another question, a couple of questions coming in. If you didn't run a rebuild side, so if you were just a mitigation only company, would you have different KPIs in your top 5?
Yes, I certainly would. So I would need to think about the different KPIs that we would have if we were not a repair, but just mitigation only. One that would certainly stay is that estimated demo completion date. That one has been huge for us, so we can know when demos getting completed, so crews can come back out there and get the work done. And do you guys do any content manipulation? That could be a big one too, because I would want to track, I would say, cycle time to completion. Obviously, gross profit margin is a huge one. Labor hours are big, especially in the mitigation world, because you want to make sure that your crews are spending time on billable work that's actually moving the job forward, and not unbillable time, excuse me. So those are a couple that I would track if I was mitigation and not rebuild.
I'm going to probably slip in that the equipment validation one would be pretty important too, since I know that equipment.
Certainly keep that. Yes, for
Just
sure.
a little shout out to Encircle and Hydro there for equipment calculations and tracking how you're doing with that one.
That would definitely be one on the top 5 list to keep for sure.
Cool. How often should companies be revisiting and adjusting their metrics and KPIs?
I would say that at minimum once a year, but the truth is you're going to feel it sooner if your KPIs are stale. The phrase that we talk about here is, what got you here is not going to get you there. Because maybe tracking cycle time, it was fine when you were doing 3 million in revenue, but at 10 million, it's not going to cut it. You need to layer in things like gross margin by job type or department, days to invoice, or job cost accuracy would be another one, because restoration, it is a constant moving target. Carrier requirements change, your customer expectations change, weather events, they're going to put different types of pressures on your business. So if you don't visit your KPIs regularly, you're going to be measuring yesterday's problems instead of today's. So I would say for us, the annual reviews, it's worked well, but we certainly stay flexible. If we notice that a KPI is driving the wrong behavior, or maybe it's no longer relevant to our business, we are certainly not afraid to pivot mid-year, because your metrics really should be seen as a tool and not a tradition.
Amazing. We have another question around your tech stack and software solutions. Joe's asking, how many different software solutions are you utilizing as a part of your software stack, and what percentage of revenue is ideal?
That is a great question. I would have to get back to you on the percentage of the revenue specifically, but the tech stack here, we know in the restoration industry, there is not a one size fits all. You're not going to find one product that does everything for your business. And nor do I really think that there should be one, because you want the software vendors that you use to be specialized in their craft, and then obviously just hope for integrations. We're all about integrations. But for our tech stack, I would say we at least have 20 different business systems that we do utilize to help keep us efficient and accountable in our day-to-day. Certainly, no, not all of those integrate, but in today's world, if we were adding in something new to the mix, integration is a huge piece of what we do look out for and what we are mindful of. But at the end of the day, even if I have 20 different systems, we are considering the field crews, the people on the front lines, the people that are meeting customers at some of the worst moments of their life. And I have to ask the question, is this tool going to make their lives, their jobs easier? Is this tool going to help them serve that customer better? And if the answer to that question is no, then we are not going to introduce it. So I would say yes, about 20 systems that we utilize on a day-to-day to keep us efficient, but we do have all of those flowing in to our Power BI analytics tool so you can see where you stand as it relates to your KPIs and their metrics.
So we've got time for a few more questions, probably 2 or 3 more. So Taylor, how can somebody better implement communication between field teams and office teams? Is there a known or recommended job life cycle to follow?
That is an excellent question. And it really just, it, it depends on your specific business. But for us, I would say the best way to improve communication between the field and the office is to standardize your updates and make them easy for the field team to capture, whether that's through log notes or photos or maybe voice dictation that's pushed directly into your job management system. And then once that's done for the communication piece back to the office, automated notifications that are sent to your office staff so they have the confidence that X, Y, and Z was done in the field. That automated notification, it helps streamline that communication so there's not a disconnect or maybe unnecessary phone calls even from the field to the office.
That's great. We have time for, I think, 2 more questions. One just came in. So subtrades taking a long time to send quotations seems to throw off accuracy of KPIs. Do you have any suggestions on how to get around this?
So the question was about sub trades. They're taking a long time to submit their quotes. And then I guess that would obviously impact being able to get the work started. I would really suggest just having a healthy database of sub trades. We refer to them as trade partners here. So if somebody isn't submitting a quote to you, perhaps I don't know, find another one. If you're not, I'm not going to chase you down for a quote. I'll just move on to the next one and have that conversation, because ultimately at the end of the day, you are the representative of your business to that customer. You're the face. They don't necessarily know that you're having to deal with multiple trade partners over here. So I think just protecting, being that liaison between the customer and then your trade partners as well, and making sure that you are tracking scheduling times with your trade partners. That's been another one for us at Southeast Restoration as well, with tracking start and end times to make sure that our trades are not only getting their quotes sent to us, but we have them scheduled each day on a job. A day on a job should never go by where somebody's not on site, because you don't want to lose that confidence and just increase that waiting time with a customer.
One final question, and for anybody, if there's questions that we didn't get to, I will pass them along to Taylor, and we will make sure that we get those questions answered for you. So we appreciate all of the engagement and all the questions that have come through. Last one. It's the age of AI. That conversation is happening everywhere, all the time, all at once. We're sort of bombarded with AI tools and conversations all the time. How do you see AI being leveraged for tracking field metrics, Taylor?
The loaded question that seems like everyone is talking about. I would say that artificial intelligence, it can take the manual data entry out of field metrics by automating data capture. It can transcribe your job notes, tag and label your photos, or maybe flag delays and gaps in real time. But the biggest thing about artificial intelligence is AI does not replace your KPIs. You still have to define what matters, But the beauty of AI is it certainly does have the ability to remove those friction points of collecting, cleaning, and interpreting that data so leaders can coach in real time. And then that would ultimately allow your teams to focus on execution as opposed to capturing manual information.
So I just want to wrap up here, Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us. I think for me, some of the key takeaways, there were sort of three that I took away from this conversation was to focus on fewer high impact field metrics. Don't try to measure everything all at once. Build systems and habits to support accountability and consistency, I think was the word of the day. That's what you talked about a lot was consistency. And then finally, that metrics, those field metrics, drive profitability through better documentation and faster cash flow. So I will give a shout out to Encircle because we can help with that better documentation and getting all of that in one place and streamlining that communication between field and office. So if you are interested in, if you're not already an Encircle customer, we'd love to show you what we can do. So thank you again, Taylor. Really appreciate it. Look forward to working with you again in the future.
Thank you.
So thanks so much and have a great day.